The night was silent, broken only by the crack of fire from the wrecked human ship. Smoke rose into the dark alien sky, and the ground shook as the burning metal hissed. Out of the flames stumbled a lone human, his body weak but his eyes sharp. He was alone, surrounded by a world that did not know mercy. From the shadows they came, tall figures, armored with black steel, their glowing eyes fixed on the small stranger. Alien warriors, proud and fierce, with blades that shimmered in the moonlight. They moved like predators, circling him slowly, their voices deep and harsh. One voice cut through the others, strong, cold, commanding. The human turned his head and saw her. A female warrior, taller than the rest, her armor covered with scars of battle. Her face was sharp, marked with lines of old wounds. Every warrior bowed when she walked, for she was their commander, feared by many, loved by none. She stepped closer, her heavy boots pressing into the sand. Her gaze pierced him like a spear. "You are small," she said in a tone filled with contempt. "You are fragile, human, like glass ready to break." The warriors laughed, their voices echoing like thunder. But the human did not break. He stood tall, even with blood on his lips and dust on his clothes. He looked at her without fear, without hate, without mockery. And then, with a voice calm as the quiet before a storm, he whispered, "You are beautiful." The world froze. Every warrior turned silent, their laughter dying in their throats. The commander's golden eyes widened, and for the first time, her armor of pride cracked. No one had ever dared to speak such words to her. Not her enemies, not even her people. To them, she was a weapon, a beast, a commander, never a woman, never beautiful. Her hand tightened on her blade. The air between them burned with tension. The warriors shouted for her to strike him down, but she did not move. Her heart pounded against her chest, her breath caught, her mind screamed, but her body hesitated. "Do you mock me, human?" she asked, her voice trembling in a way her soldiers had never heard before. But the human's eyes were steady, his words soft yet firm. "No, I do not mock you," he said. "I see you, and you are beautiful." Her jaw clenched, her pride battled with confusion. How could a weak creature speak with such certainty? How could his words cut deeper than any blade? She turned away sharply, hiding the storm inside her. "Chain him," she ordered, her voice rough again. "Take him to the fortress." Chains were thrown over his wrists, pulling him down. But as they dragged him through the dust, his eyes never left her. And she, though she refused to show it, felt his gaze burning inside her like a secret fire. That night, in the silence of her chamber, she looked at her reflection in the polished steel of her blade. For years, she had only seen a monster, scars, and shadows. But tonight, the echo of a human's voice haunted her. "You are beautiful." And for the first time, she did not know if it was a lie, or if she had been blind to the truth all along. The fortress walls rose high into the alien sky, jagged like teeth of a beast. Inside its halls, echoes of heavy boots and cruel laughter filled the air. The human was dragged through dark corridors, chains biting into his skin. Everywhere he looked, eyes of the alien warriors followed him, filled with hate and amusement. At the center of the fortress sat the female commander, her throne carved from black stone. She watched as the human was thrown before her, his knees hitting the ground. Her warriors cheered, mocking him, calling him weak, calling him prey. But she did not join their laughter. She only stared at him, her heart unsettled. In their language, whispers spread through the crowd. "She is cursed," they said, "no mate, no children, no softness. She carries scars like chains, no beauty, only fear." The commander heard every word, though she pretended not to care. For years, these words had followed her like shadows, cutting deeper than any blade. But tonight was different. Tonight, a fragile human had looked into her eyes and called her beautiful. It was madness. It was impossible, and yet the memory would not leave her. Each time she blinked, She heard his voice again, steady and unafraid. You are beautiful. Her pride screamed to crush him, to silence his voice forever. But her heart, hidden behind years of armor, hesitated. Why did his words shake her so deeply? Why did they burn louder than the laughter of her own people? The human, chained but unbroken, lifted his head slowly. He did not look at the warriors. He did not bow to the crowd. His gaze was fixed only on her, as if no one else existed. And for the first time in her life, she felt seen. The warriors demanded blood. End him, they cried. Show your strength. They wanted a display. They wanted her blade to cut him down before their eyes. But she raised her hand, and silence fell. Her golden eyes never left his, and her words came cold but heavy. He will live. Gasps filled the hall. Anger spread like fire. Her decision was a wound to their pride. A commander should show no mercy. A leader should crush weakness. Yet she had spared him. That night, when the hall was empty and the fortress silent, she walked alone in the training ground, her sword slicing through the air. But her strikes were uneven, her focus broken. She could not drive away the memory of the human's words. Each swing of her blade echoed with the whisper, "You are beautiful." She hated it. She feared it. And yet she could not escape it. Her scars, once badges of honor, now felt heavy upon her skin. She had never questioned them before, but now she wondered, were they truly marks of strength, or chains that trapped her in the eyes of her people? At dawn, she returned to his cell. The human sat quietly, his back against the wall, his chains still binding him. When she entered, he looked up, and once again there was no fear in his eyes. Only calm, only truth. "Why did you say it?" she asked, her voice lower than a whisper. His reply was simple, without hesitation. "Because it is true." Her breath caught, her chest tightened. She wanted to strike him, to silence the storm inside her. But instead she turned and left. For the first time in her life, a commander of war felt something she could not name. Something stronger than pride, something deeper than shame. And in that silence, she realized the human had planted a seed that no blade could cut away. The morning sun rose like a blade of fire across the alien sky. Trumpets of war echoed through the fortress, shaking the stone walls. The human was dragged from his cell and thrown into the central arena, a vast circle of black sand surrounded by towering warriors. The ground still carried the stains of old battles, reminders of those who had fallen before. The commander stood above, her armor gleaming in the light. Her face was unreadable, cold as stone, yet her eyes never left him. This was no ordinary day. This was the trial of fire, an ancient test meant to prove strength or end life. No weak creature had ever survived it. And now, a fragile human was being cast into its jaws. The crowd roared, voices filled with hunger for blood. They wanted a show, they wanted to see him break. The warriors mocked him, calling him prey, calling him dust. But the human did not bow. He stood in the center, chains removed, his body small against the towering figures. Yet his eyes held something they did not understand. Calm, steady, unyielding. The first challenge began. A beast was released, its body covered in fire like scales, its eyes glowing red. It roared and charged, claws digging into the sand. The human had no weapon, no shield, only his wits. He moved fast, rolling under its strike, his hands grabbing a shard of broken stone. With speed and courage, he stabbed at its softer neck. The beast screamed, thrashing, and fell. The crowd fell into silence for a moment, then erupted with disbelief. The commander's lips pressed tight, hiding the storm inside her. Her warriors whispered in shock. How can he still stand? He should be dead. But deep inside, a strange feeling burned in her chest. Pride. The second challenge came. Two warriors entered the arena, blades gleaming, their bodies massive. They attacked with fury, but the human was clever. He used the sand, the dust, the environment, blinding one with a quick throw of dirt. He dodged, rolled, grabbed one's arm, and let their own strength throw the other down. The crowd gasped as one warrior fell, defeated by trickery. The second, angry and reckless, swung too wide, and the human slipped behind him, pushing him into the wall. The alien crumpled, stunned. Once again, the human had survived. The commander's fists clenched at her side. She could no longer hide the spark in her eyes. This human, small as he was, fought like a flame that refused to die. He had no strength of giants, but he carried something even her people had forgotten: courage without arrogance. The final challenge began. The crowd demanded his death. The warriors demanded proof. A ring of fire lit around the arena, flames rising high. And from the gates stepped a champion, one of their strongest, a brute covered in steel. He was twice the size of the human, his blade heavy as thunder. The human's breath slowed, his body tired, yet his spirit did not bend. The champion swung with fury, his blade cutting through the air. Each strike forced the human back. Each clash of steel against stone shook the ground. But the human did not run. He waited, he studied. And when the champion grew reckless, he struck. A quick move, a stone to the knee, a strike to the throat. The giant stumbled, falling into the fire, the flames swallowing him whole. The arena went silent. The human stood in the center, chest rising and falling, his body marked with wounds but his spirit unbroken. He had faced a trial of fire and lived. No one could deny it, not even the cruelest voices. The commander's heart pounded in her chest. She should have been angry. She should have called him lucky, weak, unworthy. But she could not, because when she looked at him, she saw something her people had lost long ago. And in that moment, she realized the human was more than a prisoner. He was a fire that refused to be put out. The trial of fire ended, but its flames still burned inside the fortress. The human had survived what no outsider should have survived. Warriors whispered his name with anger, with disbelief, with fear. Some called him a trickster, others called him cursed. But none could deny the truth. He had lived where many had died. The commander sat alone in her chamber that night, the torches flickering against the stone walls. Her armor lay on the ground beside her, but her heart felt heavier than steel. She had seen a human fight, not with brute strength, but with cunning, courage, and will. Every move he made had reminded her of something her people had long forgotten. That victory was not only in power, but in spirit. She tried to sleep, but the memory of his voice would not let her rest. "You are beautiful," it echoed again and again. Her own reflection stared back at her from the blade she polished. Scars ran across her face, her body, marks of war and survival. Her people had always mocked her, calling her beast, cursed, unworthy. And yet a human, weak in body but strong in heart, had looked at her as if none of that mattered. Unable to fight the storm inside her, she went to his cell. The night was silent, the fortress asleep, the guards unaware. She stepped inside, her heavy boots echoing softly against the floor. The human sat against the wall, his head turning slowly when he heard her. His eyes met hers, calm as always, steady, unafraid. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty. It was filled with questions, with tension, with something neither could name. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice low, almost trembling. "Why did you call me beautiful?" Her words carried no anger, only confusion, only doubt. She had faced enemies with swords, armies with fire, but never had words wounded her so deeply. The human tilted his head, his expression simple. "Because you are," he said, his tone soft but firm. No hesitation, no mockery, only truth. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. She wanted to shout, to strike him, to silence the storm his words created. But she could not, because in that moment, she wanted to believe him, even if the whole world had told her otherwise. "You are blind," she whispered bitterly, her voice sharp though her heart trembled. "You see scars and call them beauty? You see a monster and call her woman." But the human did not falter. "I see you," he said simply, Not what they say, not what you fear, only you. Her eyes widened, her armor of pride cracking once more. No warrior, no leader, no voice had ever spoken to her like this. And for the first time in her life, she felt weak, not in body, but in spirit, because she realized that strength alone had never filled the emptiness inside her. She turned away sharply, afraid of the heat in her chest. "You are a fool, human," she said, though her voice lacked its usual fire. "You speak like you know me, but you do not." Yet even as she left the cell, her steps heavy, her heart refused to let go of his words. The following days passed, but something had changed. She found herself watching him during the warrior's training. When others mocked him, she felt anger rise within her. When he stumbled, she felt the urge to steady him. When he spoke, she found herself listening, even when his words were soft and simple. A silent bond began to form, one that neither of them admitted. A bond stronger than chains, stronger than scars. A bond that frightened her more than any battle ever had. At night, she would stand on the fortress walls, looking at the stars, and she wondered if somewhere in the vast sky, fate had played a cruel game, bringing a fragile human into her world, and making her feel, for the first time, that she was more than a weapon, that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of being seen. The fortress was alive with whispers. The human had survived the trial of fire, and now the warriors watched him with a mix of fear and hatred. But more dangerous than their hate was their suspicion. They had seen their commander's hesitation, her strange mercy, her silence when she should have spoken with iron. Around the war table, the alien leaders gathered, their voices sharp as blades. "The human is a disease," one growled. "His weakness poisons her mind. She spares him, she defends him. Soon she will betray us all," another hissed. Their eyes burned with anger, but also with something else, fear. Fear that their great commander, the unbroken spear of their people, was changing. The commander entered the hall, her armor heavy on her shoulders. Her golden eyes swept across them, but she knew the truth. They did not see her as stronger for sparing the human. They saw her as weaker, and weakness was death among her kind. That night, in the shadows, a plot was born. The leaders whispered their plan in secret. They would take the human from his cell, drag him to the arena once more, and before all eyes, they would execute him, not to punish him, but to test her. If she allowed it, her heart was a lie. If she resisted, then she was the traitor they feared. The dawn came with the sound of iron doors. The human was seized, his chains clattering as they dragged him through the corridors. This time, there was no trial, no challenge, only a blade raised for his death. The crowd gathered, their voices loud, their bloodlust strong. The commander stood at the edge of the arena, her face carved from stone. But inside, her heart thundered like war drums. The human was forced to kneel, his hands bound, his head bowed. A warrior raised his sword high, ready to strike. In that moment, the fortress seemed to hold its breath. The commander's people watched her, waiting. Would she let him die, as honor demanded? Or would she reveal the truth her enemies already suspected? Her hands trembled against her blade. She could have looked away. She could have let it end. But when her eyes met his, calm even in the shadow of death, something inside her broke. She would not, let the only voice that had ever seen her truly be silenced. "Stop!" Her voice thundered, echoing through the arena. The warrior froze mid-strike, the crowd gasped. She stepped forward, her blade drawn, her armor gleaming with fury. "No one touches him," she growled. "He is under my protection." The arena erupted into chaos, shouts of rage filling the air. "Traitor!" they cried. "She betrays her people for prey." The leaders stepped forward, their blades ready, their eyes cold. But the commander's stance did not falter. She placed herself between the human and her own kind. For the first time in her life, her enemy was not across the battlefield. It was her own people. The first warrior lunged, and steel clashed against steel. The crowd roared as sparks flew. The commander fought like a storm, her blade cutting through the air with fury. Every strike was not only for survival, but for the fragile human behind her. The human, though chained, did not cower. He moved when he could, using his mind, tripping one warrior, pulling another down with his chains. Together, in the chaos, they fought, not equals in strength, but equals in spirit. The fortress walls shook with battle cries. Blood stained the sand, and still she stood unbroken. Her golden eyes burned with something her people had never seen before. Not just rage, not just pride, but devotion. And when the dust finally settled, when the last warrior fell silent, the commander stood tall, her blade dripping, her body scarred. The human still alive behind her. The crowd could only stare, torn between fear and awe. In that moment, a truth was carved into the heart of the fortress. She had chosen, not honor, not law, not tradition. She had chosen him. The fortress was no longer a home of warriors. It had become a battlefield. Smoke curled into the sky, fire burned in the halls, and the cries of war echoed from every corner. The commander stood in the center of chaos, her blade dripping with the blood of those who had called her sister. Beside her was the human, bruised, chained, yet unbroken. The leaders had declared her a traitor, and now the fortress itself turned against her. Wave after wave of warriors stormed the arena, their blades shining, their voices filled with rage. But the commander did not step back. She stood tall, her armor cracked, her scars burning. Every strike of her blade screamed one message: he is mine to protect. The human moved with her, not as strong, not as fast, but clever. He used the broken chains as a weapon, wrapping them around wrists and throats, pulling warriors into the dust. When she struck high, he struck low. When she faltered, he distracted. Together they became one rhythm, one force, one flame that refused to die. The warriors watching from the walls began to whisper. They had never seen her fight like this, not just with fury, but with fire born from something greater than pride. She was no longer just a commander. She was a storm. But storms cannot last forever. The human staggered, a blade cutting across his shoulder. She turned instantly, rage burning in her eyes, cutting down his attacker with a roar. Yet in saving him, she left her side open. A spear pierced her armor, sinking deep. She fell to one knee, the world spinning, the fire around her blurring. The human caught her before she fell completely, his arms shaking as he held her weight. Her blood stained his hands, hot and heavy. For a moment, the battlefield seemed to fade, only their breaths filling the silence. "You cannot fall," he whispered, his voice breaking. Her lips twisted into a weak smile, pain flashing in her golden eyes. "Do you still call me beautiful, human?" she asked, her voice low. Even on the edge of death, she wanted to know. He looked at her, no hesitation in his eyes. "Always," he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. "To me, you are more than beautiful. You are everything." Her heart pounded, not from battle, but from something she had never known. Strength not born of rage, but of love. And with that fire burning brighter than pain, she rose again. Her blade lifted, her stance unbroken. The warriors around them froze, stunned at her defiance. The last wave charged, but this time the human and the commander stood back to back. Every strike was desperate, every movement heavy, but neither surrendered. The walls shook, the fires roared, and in the heart of the chaos, they fought as one. She was the shield, he was the spark. Together, they became legend. As dawn broke, the fortress lay silent. The warriors who survived lowered their blades, their eyes filled not with hate, but with something new: respect. For the first time, they did not see her as cursed. They saw her as unbreakable. And beside her, the fragile human stood tall, proving that even the weakest could carry the strongest flame. Her body trembled, her wound burning, but she did not fall. She placed her hand on his shoulder, their eyes meeting. In that silence, a bond was sealed, unspoken yet eternal. They had faced the storm, and together they had survived. The sun rose slowly over the fortress ruins, its light soft after a night of blood and fire. Smoke curled into the sky. Broken walls stood like silent witnesses. The battlefield was quiet now, the echoes of rage replaced by the weight of silence. The commander stood in the center, her armor torn, her body trembling, blood staining her side. Yet her golden eyes burned, unbroken. Beside her stood the human, chains broken, his clothes ripped, but his spirit shining like steel. Together, they had survived what none thought possible. The surviving warriors surrounded them, their blades lowered, their eyes uncertain. They had called her cursed, beast, unworthy. They had called him prey, fragile, weak. But now, they could no longer deny what they had seen with their own eyes. They had fought, bled, and endured where others had fallen. One by one, the warriors began to bow, their voices quiet but heavy with respect. She had not betrayed them. She had reminded them of something forgotten. That strength was not only in cruelty, but in courage. That honor was not only in tradition, but in truth. The human looked at her, his chest rising and falling, his voice soft but steady. "You are not their monster," he whispered. "You are their leader, their strength, their hope." Her throat tightened, her scars feeling lighter for the first time in her life. All her years, she had carried shame like a second skin. But now, standing before her people, standing beside him, she felt different. For the first time, she did not need to hide behind steel. For the first time, she believed she was more than her scars. The warriors lifted their weapons, not in anger, but in salute. Her name echoed across the fortress, not as insult, but as honor. And though she had always stood alone, today she stood with someone who refused to leave her side. She turned to the human, her voice quiet, carrying the weight of years. "No one ever dared call me beautiful," she said, her tone soft, almost fragile. "Not once until you." His eyes met hers, and without hesitation he answered, "Because no one else saw what I see." The silence between them was no longer heavy with doubt. It was warm, filled with something neither of them had ever known: trust, belonging, love. Two souls from different worlds, bound by words simple yet unshakable. As the sun climbed higher, the fortress began to rebuild itself in spirit. The commander's people followed her, not because of fear, but because of choice. And beside her walked the human, once a prisoner, now her equal. Together, they would face whatever came next. The galaxy was vast, filled with enemies, filled with dangers yet unseen. But neither of them feared the future, because they had found in each other something worth fighting for. Something stronger than steel, stronger than fire, stronger than death itself. And so a new story began, not of a human alone, not of a commander cursed, but of two hearts bound together in a bond that no world could break. Their journey was just beginning, a journey not of betrayal, not of shame, not of war, but of hope.